Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey, and in this series we're creating Spider-Man in Unity 2D. In this video we're going to add the ability to web zip so we can move around the map quickly. Let's begin. Okay, so far we have this scene in here. There's Spider-Man and some enemies. I can move around, the enemies follow me, and I can also attack them. And after 3 hits, they get killed and they fly away. Alright. Now, one thing that is pretty essential to Spider-Man is web swinging. Since we're making this in top-down 2D, we have to get creative with how we're going to make web-based movement. So, we're going to add web zipping, where we can place the mouse at a certain position, and Spider-Man will fire a web towards that position and pull himself towards there. Alright, so that's the plan, let's get to it. So first of all, here on the game handler, let's comment out this code in here that is spawning the enemies, so we can implement our web zip and test without being bothered by the enemies. So right now there's only Spider-Man in here. Okay, great. Now in order to implement web zipping, I added some extra functions into our Spider-Man base class. So here I have a function to play the web zip shoot animation, web zip flying animation, and the sliding animation. I also have 2 functions to get the left hand position and the right hand position. So the goal is to first play the web zip shoot animation, at the same time fire the web visual from the hands towards the target position. Then when the web lands, play the flying animation whilst he is flying towards the target position. And as soon as he gets there, play the sliding animation so he slides for a short while. Alright, so that's the plan, let's get to it. We're first going to make everything work mechanically and then we'll worry about adding the visuals. So let's begin by getting the target position. On the update, let's add a function called handle web zip start. Let's make this function down here. Private void handle web zip start. Okay. We're going to do a web zip towards the mouse position when we press space. So in here do an if input.getKeyDown of keycode.space. Okay. So when we press space, let's first grab the target position. So vector 3 for the web zip target position, which will be the mouse position. So utils class.get the mouse world position. Let's calculate a vector 3 for dir to target position, which will be our web zip target position minus our get position, and normalize it. So now let's make a simple slide towards that direction. Now in order to slide, let's go up here and add a new state, and we're going to have the state called web zipping. And in here, let's also store some member variables for the web zipping direction and the target. So make a private vector 3 for the web zip dir and a private vector 3 for the web zip target position. Okay, so this is enough information for our first implementation. So we can go down here and instead of creating these variables, let's use the member variables. And then we set the state to be state.webzipping. All right. Now we go up here onto our update and add another case for the new state. State web zipping, do something. Okay. So in here, let's create a function called handle web zipping. Private void handle web zipping, and in here, let's move towards our target. So we're going to move the transform.position. We're going to move it using the web zip dir multiplied by time.delta time and also multiplied by a certain web zip speed. So let's define in here a float for the web zip speed and let's say 250f. And after we move, let's do a simple check to see if we have reached the target. So do an if vector3.distance between our position and the web zip target position. If the distance is under 5f, then let's say we have reached the target. So in here, let's set the state back to normal. Set state normal. Okay. Okay, so this is a very simple sliding movement. So again, up here we got the normal state. Whilst in the normal state, we are running this function to test if we should start web zipping. So in this function, we simply test for the spacebar. If we hit the spacebar, we store the mouse world position, which is the target. We calculate the direction to that target and we switch the state to web zipping. Then on the web zipping state, we have this function and this function defines a basic speed and moves the transform towards the WebZip direction using that speed. Once it gets within 5 units of the WebZip target, it simply goes back to normal. Alright, so let's see if all of that is correct. Okay, here's Spider-Man, and if I put my mouse in here and I press space, yep, there you go, he flew to that position. So the flying does look pretty correct, but it looks a bit bad how he stops exactly at the target. So if I place my mouse exactly in there and I hit it, he stops instantly. So let's add a bit of sliding to the end. Back in our code, let's go up here and make another state. This will be the web zipping sliding. Again, on the update, another case, state.webZipping sliding. Make another function, handle web zipping sliding. So now this function will slowly stop him before turning the state back to normal. Now we can do that very simply by reducing the speed that he's moving. So instead of defining the WebZip speed in here, let's define it up here. So a private float for the WebZip speed. And we're going to set the speed before we change the state to the WebZipping, and we no longer need this in here. Okay. So before we start, we set it to 250, and in here we use that speed. And now in here, while sliding, let's reduce that speed. So do WebZip speed minus equals the WebZip speed multiplied by time.delta time multiplied by a certain number, so let's say 8f. So essentially every frame we are reducing the WebZip speed. So after we reduce the speed, let's actually move him. And then let's do a simple if the WebZip speed, if it is too low, so let's say 5f, then he stops moving. So get the state back to normal. And on the handle web zipping, let's increase the distance on which he starts sliding. So he starts sliding before he actually reaches the target. So in here, put about 20. And in here, instead of going to the state normal, let's set the state to be state.webZipping sliding. Alright, so while we are web zipping, we move the same as previously. Then we test for a larger distance. If we do get within 20 units of our target, then we set the state to WebZipping sliding, which runs this function. And here we reduce the speed every frame. We move him forward just the same, and we check if the speed is too low. If it is, then he goes back to normal. So now instead of having an abrupt stop, we should be able to see Spider-Man slowly stopping. Okay, here we are, and now if I move in there and I hit space, yep, there you go. You can see a nice smooth slide at the end. So if I try to web zip in there, you can see right before he gets there, he starts sliding and slowly stops. Okay, good. So mechanically, everything is working. Now let's handle the various animations and effects. So in our code, on the handle web zip start, let's play the flying animation just as we switch the state. So do SpiderMan base.play the web zip flying animation and play towards the web zip deer. Okay. So we start playing the flying animation, then we switch the state to web zipping. So whilst we are in here, we are flying. Once we stop flying and start sliding, let's choose the other animation. So do the SpiderMan base, play the sliding animation, and again towards the web zip deer. Keep that animation while sliding, and then goes back to normal, and in normal he goes back to idle. Okay, so let's see that. Okay, here I am, and if I click there, yep, you can see that he is flying and then slowly stops. Alright, so the movement and animations are correct. Now the main thing we are missing is obviously the shooting the web part. Over here on the textures folder, I have a web texture. It is a pretty simple texture that repeats itself, so as you can see, just like that. You can see the import options. We are simply pivoting on the right side and everything else is pretty normal. So with this sprite renderer, we can change the draw mode from simple into tiled, and this way we can easily modify the width, and as you can see, it increases. And the way the texture is set up, you can see that it repeats seamlessly. Now we want it to extend to the right instead of to the left, so let's simply flip it on the x-axis. And this way here we are, so we essentially place this on the hand and then increase the width. So let's make this into a prefab. So create a new prefab. This will be the PF SpiderMan Web. Let's drag it on there. Okay. Now we're going to need a reference in order to spawn it. So let's simply add it to our game asset script. In case you don't know, this script is simply so we can have an object in the scene where we can drag references and access those references through code. So in here, I'm going to simply add a public transform for the PF SpiderMan Web. And back in the editor, I simply drag the prefab. Okay. So now let's go back into the SpiderMan code. And first, let's just test out spawning the web. So into the web zip start, let's comment out the code to actually start web zipping, living in this state. Okay. So in here, let's try spawning the web. So I'm going to do a transform for the SpiderMan Web, and I'm going to instantiate. I'm going to go into the game assets.instance and grab the SpiderMan Web prefab. I'm going to instantiate it on the hand position. So let's go into the SpiderMan base and get the hand left position. Okay. And quaternion.identity. So let's calculate the direction from this hand. So a vector3 for the web dir, which will be the web zip target position, minus this hand position instead of the SpiderMan position, and then normalize the whole thing. Then let's set the rotation to the SpiderMan Web .Euler angles, new vector3, put it on 0, 0, and then calculate the angle. So go into the utils class, get the angle from float, and give it the web dir. All right. And finally, we need to set the correct size. So in the SpiderMan Web, get the component of type sprite renderer and set the size to be a new vector2. Right now, we wanted to show the complete distance. So let's do a vector3.distance between the hand position. So SpiderMan base.get hand left position towards the web zip target position. So on the X, we're going to have the full distance between the hand and the target. And for the Y, let's leave it at the same Y. So use the size.y. All right, so very simply, we are instantiating the SpiderMan Web prefab. We calculate the direction towards the target from the hand position. Then we simply rotate the web using that direction. And we set the size to be the complete size by calculating the distance from the hand towards the target and using the same Y. So let's test and see if we have a web going from the hand to the target position. So in here, if I press space, yep, there's the web exactly going from the hand towards the target. Okay, great. Now, before we animate the web, we actually have to use the base animation of the SpiderMan actually firing the web. So we have to go up here and essentially create a state so we don't go back to idle by the handle movement. So let's go up here and make a state web zipping starting. And in here, case web zipping starting, and we're simply going to do nothing. This is meant to be just a time between the firing the web and until the web reaches its target. So in here, let's set the state to, and now in here, do SpiderMan base and play the animation of web zip shoot. And we're going to shoot towards the web zip dir. Okay. So now if I press space, yep, there you go. He switched the animation and spawned the web. Okay. Now let's finally animate the web. So in here, I'm going to do the simplest animation possible, but later on, we're going to refactor the code to make things more clean. But for now, let's do it in the most obvious way. So let's use the function updater, which again, part of the CodeMonkey utilities that you can grab for free from unitycodemonkey.com. And I'm going to create, and essentially the function updater allows me to trigger an action every update. So this is perfect for easily animating our web. And now in here, let's begin by capturing a reference to the sprite renderer. So sprite renderer for the SpiderMan Web sprite renderer. And let's actually grab the reference outside of the update. Okay. Let's also calculate a new vector2 for the web zip start. And this will be new vector2. And again, this is the start. So we start off at 0. And then use the same size.y. And then for the web zip end will be the distance between the left hand and the target position. Okay, so this is the start and the end. Let's set the sprite render.size to be on the web zip start. And up here we can remove this. All right. And the last thing we need is a float for the time to reach target, which we're going to start at 0. So using all that, we can simply do a lerp. So do the SpiderMan Web sprite render dot size equals a vector2.lerp. And we're going to lerp it from the web zip start to the web zip end, and using time to reach the target. And before we do that, let's increase the time to reach target by time.delta time multiplied by a certain value, let's say about 8f. Okay. And finally, let's simply do if time to reach target. If it is bigger than 1f, then he has reached the target. So in here, let's do a return true, which will automatically destroy the function updater. And if not, let's return a false and keep updating. Okay. So now we should see the web flying towards the target. Okay, so here I am. I put my mouse in here and I hit space. Yep, there you go. The web went and it stopped as soon as it reached the target. So it goes and exits like that. All right, good. So now all we need is to start web zipping, and while flying, we're going to modify the size of the web. So first things first, when it actually reaches the target, that's when we want to start web zipping. So this code in here, that's what we want to use up here. So in here, start flying. So let's see if Spider-Man starts flying once the web reaches the target. Okay, here I am, I press there, and yep. As you can see, he starts flying as soon as the web reaches the target. So first he fires the web gets there, start flying, and keep flying. All right, good. So now that we are flying, we need to deal with the size of the web whilst actually flying. So first we need to store the instantiated prefab as a member variable so we can modify it. So let's go up here and make a private transform for the SpiderMan Web. And that's what we're going to use in here instead of a local variable. Okay. And now while flying, which is in this function right here, after we move our transform, let's update our web. So the first thing is set the SpiderMan Web.position, and we want to reposition it again to be on top of the hand. So the position will be the SpiderMan base.get the hand left position. So we have repositioned it, and now we're going to need to make sure the rotation is correct. So there you go. Rotate it from this position towards the web zip target. All right. And finally, we need to set the size. So in here, I grab a reference to the sprite renderer on the web, and we calculate the size to be the exact distance between the hand left position and the web zip target. So on every frame, the web will have the exact size. And when we actually reach a target, when we start sliding, let's actually destroy our web. So do destroy on the SpiderMan Web.game object. All right, so let's see if the web now correctly stays linked between the hand and the target. Okay, here I am, put my mouse in here, press space. Yep, there you go. As you can see, he fires. Once he gets there, he starts pulling and he goes, and just like that. So I can now zip around and the web does look pretty correct. Okay, so the only thing we are missing is to actually add a web to both hands. So let's go up here and rename the SpiderMan Web to be SpiderMan Web Left and add another one for the right. And here we are setup web left. Then we're going to do a setup web right. Instead of using that one, use the right and so on. When we get there, let's destroy both of them, the left and the right. Okay. And on start, instantiate the left, animate it, and let's copy paste and do the same thing for the right. Alright, so here I am, and now if I put the mouse in here and I press space, yep, there you go, he fired two webs, then he pulled himself towards there, and he fired, and now I can slide around and move around as many times as I want, and once I get there, I can still move normally. So move normally, then web zip, move, web zip, and so on. So there you have it, we added web zipping to our Spider-Man so we can move around fast throughout the map. As always, you can download the project files and utilities from unitycodemonkey.com. If you have any questions, post them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Subscribe for more videos and I'll see you next time.